Hi all, thanks Jeremy for making this happen. A little bit about me. So I was always interested in everything, science, math related, which led me to study engineering in undergrad. To be honest, I picked my engineering by process of elimination. I hated physics, I hated bio, didn't really know much about computer science, so chemistry was kind of the default. Studied that through all of school, realized that I did not want to move into, I guess you could say, the middle of nowhere, which led me to consulting. I also wasn't able to pick an industry. So spent a couple of years in consulting, trying. My first year, I was in 10 projects across 10 different industries in 10 different cities. So definitely can talk about that. Um, Realized I wasn't really understanding a lot of, the common business skills that I needed to be working with my clients, especially at higher levels. So that sent me back for my MBA at Columbia. I actually originally intended on going back to consulting because they were going to pay for it. Instead, an opportunity at Google came about. I really, really like the team, love the company, and the work that I'm doing. So now I'm almost about a year in working at Google in the ad space, helping launch our products. So that is a little bit about me. I'm more than happy to kind of go into the questions.
Okay, so now we're going to move into some prepared questions. And the first question is, how did you transition from studying chemical engineering at Cornell to going into business and eventually getting an MBA at Columbia?
So I think the key thing with my undergrad degree or any undergrad degree is trying to find those transferable skills. So with engineering, a lot of that is, how you break down problems, how you understand processes. So while in undergrad, I was doing a lot of stuff with, chemistry and chemical names. So how are they moving through this process flow? Well, that directly related to what I was doing in consulting because I was looking at, technology instead of looking at chemicals, or I was looking at, how efficient, people are working together instead of looking at, maybe water moving through a pipe. So those transferable skills were so key moving into consulting, and then a lot of stuff you kind of pick up along the job. The next pivot, moving into my MBA, was just kind of figuring out what skills I think I was missing. For me, I personally think you need to be well-rounded to be a higher up at any company. And I had a lot of those technical skills. I understand how to be working with people across many different areas, but I didn't really speak the same language as them. They were talking, in finance and marketing terms, and it just wasn't making it through. And sometimes I get it, sometimes I wouldn't, which is why I took that step and said, hey, I need to take, 2 years off, get my MBA, and try again. Didn't end up going back into consulting, realizing that I had the skills that I wanted from that. The next thing is I wanted to actually work at one of those companies that I was helping. And that's how I ended up pivoting into Google.
Okay, so our next question is, what internships have you completed and how have they prepared you for the professional work environment?
So I think the most key thing when you're looking at internships is, what skills do you need first? And then secondary, what companies are you going to be working at? Because the company names are definitely important and they look great on your resume, but those skills are really the core thing that companies, even for future internships or full-time jobs, are looking at. So in high school, I was also at Bergen County Academies. I did my senior experience in a lab. Focusing, and I basically understood the lab process of how do you prepare samples, how do you, take a process from a really, really small product to a really, really big product, learn those skills. Then I said, okay, great. I'm not really interested in that industry. I want to be working more so in pharma. And I originally intended on, focusing in pharmaceuticals my entire undergrad. So then I moved to a pharma role to get that company experience and working with, chemicals that were living versus before I was dealing with a lot of makeup. Got those skills, understood in a little bit bigger scale of a lab exactly how I was doing, what I was doing, realized that I didn't really like pharma. So then from pharma, I said, well, I like food. Food's interesting. Food's a lot bigger scale. So I took all of the skills that I had learned in a small lab, in a big lab with living samples, bringing a product from nothing to something. And I said, great, I want to work in food. Used all of those skills to get a job at General Mills. And my last internship in college was at a big plant that actually makes Totino's. So if you've ever had pizza rolls or pizza, I was at the only place in the world that makes those. And that was kind of where I really saw things fully scaled up and, fully bringing a product from nothing to something, seeing it move out of the plant, like taking things home that actually were made right in front of me. And that was kind of the skill of like full on scale. Came to the crux of, I didn't really understand what I wanted to do next, which is why I went into consulting. But those internships definitely got me the skills where when I was going to interview for my final consulting role, I said, hey, I've never done this before, but I've worked at 3 different companies in 3 different industries doing 3 different roles. And that's exactly what I would do when I would work for you. Funny enough, again, I had to go through the interview process for internships about 2 years ago while I was in business school. Same deal. I had never worked at a startup. That was a skill I wanted. I prioritized skill over company. I went to a company that no one had really heard of, but I got those skills, and that's how I got my Google internship, which I ended up turning into a full-time job. So to summarize everything, focus on the skills first, then the more well-known companies will start to follow once they see you have that core ground underneath you.
All right, so our next question is, how were your experiences at Deloitte and what did you do for them?
Yeah, so when I was at Deloitte, I was working in the tech strategy space, which is pretty ambiguous, but it's basically the connector between their strategy and operations organization, which a lot of times they're super, super high level. They're like, you want to grow by X% in this many years. We think that you can do this for them, but they don't really implement things. And then on the other side is the technology group that is actually building the tools and helping implement them across different offices. I sat right in the middle. So I was doing a lot of translation of what are these business people saying to, okay, how do we actually build it and how do we make it work? Which was perfect because I knew a little bit of both, but wasn't really an expert at any of the above. I think the best thing about consulting is I was able to try a lot very quickly. So I knew that I wanted to do 3 years of work and then I wanted to get my MBA, which is a pretty tight timeline. But I had to very, very quickly find what I liked and then become an expert in it. So in my first year, as I was saying before, I did 10 projects in 10 cities with 10 different companies doing 10 different things, which seems pretty crazy. It was a very crazy year. I started off at a bank, helping them decide if they were going to buy something or if they were going to build it on their own. Then I used that experience at a bank to then move to an M&A project within finance. Then I used that M&A project to get a dental insurance project. I used dental insurance. You're going to see me gradually pivot from dental insurance. I got to health insurance, I got to pharma, which pharma was what I thought I wanted. So I used all of those slow pivots to get to the thing I really, really wanted and found out it wasn't for me, which is fine. But then I kind of like went all over for another 6 months until I found a team that I liked doing work that I wanted to do, which is the really the most important thing. When you look at consulting, it's where are you going to be working in the country or even the world? Who are you going to be working with and what are you going to be doing? And often you don't find all 3, but I found all 3. So for my last almost 2 years, I was working in Chicago, so great city, with an awesome group of people that we all had very similar working personalities. And we were doing work at a big health plan. So we were helping make sure that doctors' information got to all of their patients, which I thought was, super relevant, super important. And it was kind of the other side of the supply chain that I had thought I wanted to do all along. I thought I wanted to make the pharmaceuticals, but now I was actually helping people receive them from doctors.
Okay, so our next question is, what is the work environment and culture at Google like? What do you do for them?
Yeah, so I'll describe what I do first because it's a little more complicated how we build things. So I sit in the ads part of Google, which a lot of people in Google work in ads. It's where we make a lot of our money. But when we build products at Google, it's pretty unique in that there are 3 groups that really come to the table. So the first group is the product managers. And at Google, they're very, very technical. They mostly are managing engineers and they're managing the designers and helping things get launched. The second group is sales and marketing. They are saying, how are we going to launch this? What is the name of it going to be? How are we going to tell customers about it? What is the plan going to look like? What do our customers think? And then the third group is where I sit, which is, great, we launched this thing. How do we support it? And then what are our customers saying about our products? So my role as a product ops manager is I am basically the voice of all of support and indirectly the voice of the customer. So when I come to the table with my marketing counterparts and my engineering counterparts, I say, this is what people are thinking now. This is how big of a problem it is. And then we kind of work to make sure that those problems get fixed. Or maybe it's education, what have you, gets resolved. And within that ad space, my product is helping small businesses improve their ads on their own through automation. So when you look at what is the work environment and culture, I chose Google over having business school paid for by a consulting company because of the work environment and the culture. Everyone is super, super open. Our calendars are completely open to the fact that I can look at the CEO, Sundar's calendar right now and tell you everything on it, which I had never seen in consulting. And the way that you introduce yourself to someone is you just put time on their calendar. You don't even ask them permission. You don't email them and say, hey, I'm Danielle. This is what I want to talk to you about. No, you just say, in the invite, say, hey, I'm Danielle. Let's talk now. Feel free to remove this if it doesn't work. And that was kind of bizarre to me. It seemed like very, very relaxed, which I like. Work-wise, as long as the work gets done, they don't really care when you do it. So Friday was a beautiful day. I pinged my manager at lunch and said, hey, I'm gonna go for a walk for the rest of the day. And he was like, great. I'll see you on Monday in our next meeting. So they're very much like trying to foster and make us do good work, but enjoy doing the work that we're doing, which I enjoy. What I like about Google is we're a big company, but it feels small at the same time. So our teams are quite small. So under my manager, there are 14 of us. And I'm very, very close with those 14 people. And kind of under my director, there's 55 of us. So I'm pretty close with them. But other than that, I know my counterpart teams, but the rest of Google, I don't care about until I'm looking for a new role, which another reason I like Google is they would rather you find a new role within the company versus leave. So you look at a lot of people on LinkedIn and you say, why have they been at Google for 10 years? Well, every time they get bored, they just switch their role or they switch their product. And like your manager kind of pushes you for it. So my manager every 6 months says, hey, Danielle, do you still like this? If not, like, how can we fix this? How do we change the product you're working on? Do you want me to introduce you to other people in other areas that you think would be better for you? So to sum it up, super open, super helpful. And I've never really seen it with all the clients that I had been working on in the past. So I figured I would at least try it out. And then if I didn't like it, reassess in a year or so.
All right, so now we've moved into our final prepared question, and that is, what advice would you have for a high schooler who wants to go into product operations or business technology?
So more tactically, I would say find a degree or something that you're interested in that's very versatile. So an engineering degree, for example, I'm only talking about engineering because I don't know any of the degrees, but engineering, you can kind of go into anything if you change your mind a lot, which is what I did. I changed my mind a lot. I thought I wanted to be in pharma. I thought I wanted to be in food. I didn't know what I wanted to be in. And at least with my degree, I was able to pivot versus had I gotten a chemistry degree, I would have been I could have gotten out, but it would have been, I would have been torn to chemistry a little bit more versus chemical engineering. I was able to lean on my engineering degree a bit more. So kind of be careful when you're picking what you're looking to study. Next thing is when you're looking at any opportunity, even like when you're going into college or applying to places, just be open. Even if you haven't heard of a company, there's a lot of good skills that you could get from working in that role that you can use to get to the next thing. I get told this a lot now, even like 10, 15 years later than most of you, that don't think of your career in like what is next or what is, in the next 3 years. Your career is, how many years are we going to be working? 40, 50, maybe even 60, hopefully not. But a lot of times with work, it's gradual pivots. So if you remember when I was talking about the industries I was working in consulting, I knew I wanted pharma, but I got put at a bank. How did I get there? Like a lot of very, very small pivots of saying, okay, well, I can use these skills to get this. I'm at a dental insurance company. Well, healthcare is a little bit closer to pharma. Let me make that jump. And then let me make that jump into pharma. So think about your career or whatever you want to do in just small little pieces towards a big end goal. And then lastly, specifically if you're interested in product ops or business technology, I'd say that the tech industry, even for people that are working in business related roles, is starting to get a little bit more technical. And you don't need to be for a lot of these roles. But it definitely does help if you have like a little bit of basis and you're familiar with talking with things. So as you're picking courses, maybe you want to take an elective in SQL, for example, or systems integration, just something that's on the side so that you have that skill in your back pocket. It may not be the thing that you do for work. So every single day I don't code. I don't know how to code. I hate coding, but I have a script that someone wrote for me and I change a few words. And when I'm feeling fancy, I'll add a few lines and I can pull my own data versus having to wait for Taylor sometimes takes a week to get to my request. So a lot of times like having those smaller skills will make it a lot easier and a lot quicker to get what you want in your certain role.
Okay, so that is the end of all of our prepared questions. Now I'm going to turn it over to Aarav Makadia, who is going to be leading the audience Q&A.
Awesome. So, hey, my name is Aarav Makadia. Like I said, I'm a junior at Monroe Township High School, and I'm also the president at IBC NJ. To echo everyone, thank you once again to Danielle, as well as our members for coming. And so, like Jeremy said, I'll be kind of managing our audience Q&A session today. So since we have media consent, this is going to work a bit differently than we usually have done this in the past. For those of you guys who have signed the terms already, I'm just going to open up the floor. And if anyone has any questions they want to start off with, feel free to kind of just jump in. And if you haven't signed and still have a question you'd like to ask, please send it in the chat as always. And in between people, I'll audit these specific questions. So let's begin. Does anyone want to start? All right, so I can start with a question that someone sent me. So to start off, someone wanted to know, how does the culture at Google differ from Deloitte?
Yeah, so I'll say that the main difference that I've noticed in big tech, I'll just say like big tech as a whole versus consulting is in consulting, both companies have very, very high achievers, like people that, like want to do well, want to try really hard. But in consulting, it's a lot more apparent and they do a better job of kind of pitting you against each other, which sounds horrible. But a lot of time you kind of realize that you're competing against each other for certain promotion scores and roles and the next big thing. Also just in client services in general. So this is, any time that you are working a role where you work for one company and service someone else, you're on their time. So if you have a really, really, a sweet client who is super helpful, super sweet, very understanding of your time, great, you have a great time. But if you have a very, very demanding client or a client who, or someone on your team who didn't go do a good job of, saying we're going to do this and not that, well, then, you have to work to those clients' demands. So you're going to be working, crazy hours because of a promise that you made to a client for a certain fee. So it's very different working in client services versus an industry, as in like, I'm working at Google, I'm working at General Mills. Like, this is the company I work for. I didn't make promises to any other company that I was going to do this or that. I will say consulting was really, really fun out of college because I was traveling to all these fun cities and I had like a lot of coworkers who were also traveling who were in my age group, and we would travel to Austin for the weekend or San Diego for the weekend. Maybe not in COVID times, but eventually, they will be back on the road again. So it was really nice culture with my start class, but also it wasn't as open speaking up and speaking down. So it was a lot more formalized. Like if I wanted to have a meeting with someone who was working in an area that I was interested in, I had to, maybe ask someone to introduce me to them, or, you know, email that person and kind of go back and forth before setting up time, versus, as I said, Google. Anyone, especially when you're an intern. So when you're an intern, you get a green badge, and they say like the magical green badge, you can do whatever you want with that green badge. So like there were people who were emailing directors and VPs being like, hey, I'm an intern, you know, let's sit down and talk, which you would have never really seen in consulting. That was a lot more, you know, formalized, communicating up and down. But both are getting the skills I wanted. I think consulting is a great way to accelerate and build those skills. Maybe that's because you're working a little bit more and working a little harder. And also you're pivoting so often. Like think of when, going on a bit of a tangent now, but think of a normal job. Let's say that you are working at Johnson & Johnson and you're in R&D. And you're doing a normal job for maybe, you know, a year and a half, 2 years. Well, after, you know, 6 or 9 months, you learn your job. You start to get really good at your job. And you keep doing that for the next, I don't know how many months until you move. Versus a consulting, right as you start to get good at something, you move, which really, really hard, sometimes really frustrating, but you tend to grow a lot quicker if you're willing to kind of put your heads down and say, okay, this is going to be really, really hard, but I'll have a good payoff. So both are great. I think they're good for different times in your career, but definitely learned a lot for both. So I don't want to negatively speak about either one.
Great. So I guess to add on to that from another question from a member, could you talk more about the business consulting industry in general? What traits or skills would one need for that industry?
Yeah, so the most important thing that they look for, so I used to do resume screenings for Deloitte actually. And the thing that we look for is first, you know, are you comfortable working with people? So a lot of times when you apply to a consulting internship, we are not going to give it to you if you do not have an internship at a company before that. It's kind of hard to say. Like a lot of people like working in the lab or like, you know, working at the normal job. But if we're going to put you in front of a client and charge money for you, we need to know that you're comfortable, you know, working in a business environment. So first, you're going to need an internship somewhere, some sort of company, and show that you're good with those people skills and you're kind of able to help tell a story. Storytelling is probably the most important thing that you'll need for consulting ever. Of course, you're going to want to be good with PowerPoint and Excel, which, you know, you may think you're good at that, but consultants are on a whole nother level. So I would definitely recommend, you know, YouTubing some shortcuts or, you know, formatting skills, but that's kind of more so once you're on the job. The next thing that they look for, or that we look for, is how articulate you are. So in your resume, are you able to kind of quantify how much of an impact you were able to make with blank thing that you were doing? So when you're looking for an internship before your consulting internship, make sure that when you go into it, you know what you're trying to get out of it. So I'm going to just lean on my experience. I'm trying to, you know, launch this product to this amount of people in this many countries. That's a great line of a resume, and that shows that you actually made that impact. Versus sometimes it's a little bit harder. When my first internship, I was working at an R&D lab, and it was really, really hard because in 3 months, you know, yes, you can run 300 samples, but you don't have any outcome because the timeline is so long. So definitely, one, quantify things and like make sure you have that internship with a scope. But when you're in the interview, you're going to see that the most important thing is really that storytelling. A lot of the questions we ask are, you know, behavioral. So, hey, tell me about a time that you worked with a team and someone had a disagreement. Second part of the interview is case, which you don't need to worry about this now, but it's more so structured of like, how do you think through problems? How do you logically tell a story? So storytelling, and I definitely dealt with or leaned on my engineering degree for kind of problem solving and working through and talking through things. Plenty of other degrees that help with that, but at least that's what kind of helped me.
Interesting. So I do have a couple more member questions that came in through the chat, but before I go in any further, does anyone want to ask any specific questions to Danielle personally from any of you guys who have signed the media consent form? All right, so I'll carry on with the ones I have so far. So another question, how do you know if you need to get an MBA? what would you recommend to students?
Yeah. So oftentimes, this is going to sound bad, but a lot of times it's a check mark. It's a check mark that they look for in some industries to become, a director, someone in the C-suite. It's just this silly thing in the sand that you need to get there. And that's more so like older industries. I personally think that, you need to be well-rounded to move up in a company. So for me, it was completing my skill set. I was very, very strong in math and science and things of that sort. I was very good with analysis, but I had no clue how to value a company. I had no clue how to, market something and market it well. I had no clue how to sell something. So for me, I went to my MBA to round out my degree. But many other people go to get their MBA to completely switch industries. So I have a friend who was in my class who was one of the stars of Mamma Mia, and now she's a consultant. I have a friend who was a ballerina, and now he's a banker. So if you're making one of those hard pivots, a lot of times a master's degree, whether it's an MBA or a master's of, I don't know, insert something here, are kind of needed to reset and make that pivot, which it's fine. We have many, many years in our career. If you realize the first 5 years you don't like and you want to do something completely different, what is, a year or two in school to make sure that you're actually doing that dream job. Especially if you can get a company to pay for it for you, that also makes it easier.
Perfect. So I think we had a speaker who had or a member who had a question. So I'm just going to let her ask her question, then we'll move forward.
Right. Hi there. Thank you so much for doing this today. So my question for you is, what types of extracurricular activities did you participate in high school? And do you think they kind of helped you for your career path that you're in right now?
Yeah, good question. So for me, probably many of you, I did a lot of activities in high school. And I even leaned into those activities when I was applying to internships back as an undergrad, because, when you go to college, like, what is your experience? A lot of it is your high school experience, right? So for me, I did dance competitively, and I was the captain of my dance team. So that was my leadership story of, talking through that. I also, worked in labs. So I had skills like, more technically one-on-one working and solving a problem from start to finish. I also, founded a club that raised money for breast cancer. And like we did, oh gosh, this is many years ago. I'm sorry. we would have bake sales and things of that sort. That was showing that I had initiative to, again, a lot of my clubs were very much leadership or skills based, and you're going to want to have both. But a lot of colleges and internships understand, if you're a varsity athlete and you don't have time to do a million other things, they get that. But if you're not in that bucket or not doing something very, very intensely, like, you are researching at the highest level, or I don't know, you are in some math team that's doing really, really well, they're going to want to see a couple things to show that you're well-rounded. The thing is, because it's super competitive, there's lots of people like, how are you different? So for me, I was like the artsy person. I was also in plays, as in the school play, but I was also super, super into technology, and that, weird dichotomy you didn't see very often back when I was applying to schools and applying to internships. So don't drive yourself down to the ground doing too many things, but definitely make sure that you find things that, are interesting, and show that, you're interested in a whole bunch of different things. Unless you are super, super set that, Joanna, you only want to do marketing. So you're only going to do marketing clubs from now on, which is cool. But I don't know about you, but I'm super indecisive. So that would make me really worrisome if I got my first marketing job and realized, hey, this isn't for me. Because you're going to need that well-rounded set if you ever want to pivot. So like I was even telling stories about, dance when I was trying to get into consulting, because I didn't want to come across as, just a science person or just an engineering person. So well-rounded answer is, make yourself as well-rounded as you want to be for your career, because the more well-rounded, the more different things that you can apply for.
Okay, so a couple more questions that I have gotten from members. So what career plans do you have for your future?
That's a really good question. So the funny thing is, I'm a planner. So back in high school, I knew this was going to be where I was going to be in this amount of years. I knew I wanted to go to school for chemical engineering. I knew I wanted 3 years of consulting. I knew I wanted an MBA. I knew I wanted big tech. So now that I'm here, it's really overwhelming because you have to figure out, great, you got your dream. Now what? So I'm currently looking into 2 different paths. One is more so being a people manager, which I did in consulting, but at Google, they look at people management super differently. Not relevant a lot for, any of you, but they look at the people manager role as being super, you're a coach, basically. 50% of your time you are coaching your team, and the other 50% of your time you're doing your own work. So very different from you're a normal team with your manager and you're kind of all doing the work together, and then they kind of help you on the side and you have a different mentor. Your manager is like your coach, your mentor, your everything. So that's one path I'm exploring. And then the second path I'm looking into is maybe I do want to see if I can get more technical. Maybe I want to move into that product management role and start managing, engineers and UX teams. Because I work a lot with them now, and I think we have a lot of similar skill sets. Actually, one of the PMs I work with is Cornell, a year below me. So we've been talking quite a bit about the role, if I would like it or not, and seeing if I take a chance there. If I don't like it, then I continue to move. As I said before, Google is very easy to move around, and I think it's so big that it will probably take me quite a bit of time to get sick of it, especially with enjoying the culture, enjoying the people, and enjoying the office when I get to go back in September. So I'll be here at least for another 5 to 10 years, probably we'll say 5, and then reassess from there.
All right, so I do have a couple other questions, but if any members have any specific questions and would like to ask them, feel free to just unmute and ask away. All right, so I'll keep on going. Another question we have here today is, how has COVID affected your work?
Yeah, that's been fun. So I will say with Google, we're a very global company, and like I have a lot of team members in California, in Europe, and in India, actually in Seoul too, that I work with quite a bit. So there was always this video component to my work. I will say my role though has become a lot harder with COVID because I'm advocating for so many people. So the amount of time that I have to spend now gathering all of their input, it's gone up quite a bit. But at the same time, I'm also pushing a lot of people to do what I've heard from, customer service, what I've heard from customers, and they don't report to me. So a lot of times the best way to get things done is you have to influence them, but it works a little bit better when you're friends. So if you can go grab coffee, if you can grab lunch, and they get to know you as a person, then when you say, hey, this is a really big problem, they'll say, oh, I like Danielle. I trust Danielle says this is a problem. It's a problem. I should prioritize it. Versus now I'm trying to do a lot of that virtually, and it's quite a bit harder. The other big thing that's kind of changed is, Google was always, you do your work when you want to do your work, but now it's a lot more flexible than that. So I have a coworker who is based in New York, but he works from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then I have another one who's based in New York, works from 10 to 9 p.m. So like 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. So very different schedules. And it's been a little bit harder to kind of collaborate and make projects work because of that flexibility. But I'm sure they enjoy it because I enjoy it as well too. It just makes things a little bit harder when you're trying to work together.
All right, so another question I have here is, what advice do you have for us as high school students going through the college admissions process?
So surprise, I actually interviewed for Cornell. So this is pretty relevant because I am one of the interviewers who is, scoring and making recommendations to admissions for high schoolers. So I know that we all know that you're applying to a lot of schools, but like make sure you do your work and understand, why you want to go to that school. There have been so many interviews where I've asked someone, I'll be like, what do you like about Cornell? And they're like, oh, well, I like the campus and yada yada. And I'm like, oh, great. Have you gone to campus? Because you said that was your favorite thing about the school. And I'm like, no. But on the website, it looked cool. And we understand in COVID, you can't go to these places, but at least do, a virtual tour, or don't tell me it's your favorite thing that you don't know anything about. So just make sure you've done your research. And then the second thing is, care about how you present yourself. And you're gonna laugh because probably a lot of you know this, but many people that I interview, they don't even write thank you emails anymore. So, how you're perceived, and if you're coming to me and you want to come be part of my alma mater, I want someone who I, am proud of and proud to send to my school. Send a thank you email, or, send in, like, nicely address them, before you go to their interview, or show up to your interview on time. I've had people that have kept me waiting for over 30 minutes for an interview. So you're gonna laugh because these are pretty obvious things. But I interview probably, a couple dozen people a year, and at least half of them do one or the other. But for the interview though, when you're applying, make sure, you say why you want to go to that school. And it comes from your own voice. I think a lot of times when we're writing essays, we have, our friends read them, we have a counselor read them, we have, our parents read them. And then at the end, it doesn't even sound like you. So, make sure that it's still in your voice, even if you've had a million people go through and make corrections. And I know that I think resumes are optional now when you're applying, but when I interview people, they always have a resume. So when you have a resume, just make sure it's putting your best foot forward. Make sure that, if you can quantify things, you quantify them. I lead a band of 50 students, I'm the head flautist, or I started a club that raised $1,000 in 1 year. That's a super impressive number. We want to hear it. And the last thing is exactly what we were talking about with Joanna, is that well-roundedness. We know how to play the game just like you know how to play the game. So if you started a bunch of clubs all your junior year, and wasn't doing anything before that, we know. We know that's for college admission. So, play the game, but play it well. So make sure that, you've been part of things before, that things don't just start popping up on your resume 5 months before we interview you. You're genuine, you're actually excited about the things that you're doing, and you're excited about what you want to do. You don't need to know what your career is going to be, but, why do you like the culture of the school? Why do you like the campus? Why do you like the city? Why do you like the people? Just make sure that you can kind of connect to something versus, this is a really good school, I wanted to apply to it. Yeah, that's it. So to summarize, make sure you actually do your research on the school. 2, when you're actually, applying, make sure your essays are still in your voice. 3, when you have your resume, make sure that you can quantify when possible. 4, if you have a bunch of clubs and activities, make sure that, they don't seem fake, like that you didn't just join them all junior year, or like this random club popped up that had one event, which I had someone do. Don't do that. For your interview, show up on time, dress, you don't need to be in a suit, but wear something nicely. Don't show up in a t-shirt. And then at the end, send a thank you email, which may sound very obvious, but I only get one thank you email now out of every 10 people I interview. And I don't send my feedback until probably a day after. So I give you time to do so. But yeah, it's a fun process, viewing it from this side of it. And I understand it's super, super stressful for all of you, but you will end up wherever you want to be if you put that time in to really understand how you fit in with that school, or how you fit in with that culture.
Amazing. So I do have a final question I've received through the chat, but before I ask my final question, if anyone else, again, has any questions and would like to ask it directly to Danielle, please go ahead. All right, so the final question I have is, as someone who's working at a FANG company, what recommendations do you have for us moving forward in our professional careers?
Yeah. A few. I think the first is kind of figure out the life that you want to have. What lifestyle do you want? They say that, sometimes it's family, sometimes it's friends, sometimes it's your work, and sometimes it's your social life outside of work. Well, as you move through your life, different things are going to become more important. So a lot of times right out of college, people say, hey, I want to put my head down. I'm going to work as hard as I can possibly work now. Great. That is the perfect time to do consulting. That is the perfect time to do banking. That is the perfect time to maybe do that PhD. but you don't want to be working, 80-hour weeks when you maybe are married, maybe have a kid, maybe things of that sort. So figure out what is important to you in that time of life. So for me in the very beginning, it was, I need to get my career kicked off as quickly as possible. I need to figure out what I like in that career as quickly as possible. So that's why I did the crazy 10 projects, and it was a really hard 10 months. But at the end of it, I figured out what I liked. I figured out the perfect team. Then I spent 2 years building my story for business school, got into business school. And then now out of business school, I'm in tech. I will say that tech is a little bit slower than consulting work. And it's been a little bit hard of a shift for me to go from working so much and so hard to not be working as hard. And I think that's also like the way that I work is a lot smarter because I had to do so much work before. So I always kind of joke and say I wasn't ready to slow down this early in my career. Like I probably have 5 to 7 more years where I can work 80-hour weeks. And I joke around with that, but that's probably not what I want. That's probably not what I should be doing. And now I should be kind of focusing on, those friendships that I said I'm flying out Tuesday to Thursday. Maybe I can see them now during the week. So advice point 1, figure out what you want at that point of life. Advice point 2 is, again, figure out what that end goal or idea is. It doesn't need to be a full goal, but for me, my high level goal is I want to be the person that says that this product needs to look like this, and I don't need to know any of the work or data that goes into it. I just kind of want to be the big boss. Great, high level idea. Well, what skills do I need to be the big boss? So I need to, one, understand, how those numbers are created. That's what I'm doing right now. Next, I need to understand, how do we launch a product? That's that move that I'm going to do where I'm going to work into a product manager role. Then I need to learn how to manage a team because if I'm going to be the big boss, I need to know how to manage people below me. So those are already 3 jumps that I need to take that are probably going to take me 1.5 to 2 years each to get to that end goal. So small chunks when you're looking at goals. And then the last thing is, the company really isn't everything. Like I had a lot of friends, even out of business school, who went to like these really impressive names like Goldman Sachs or I don't even know. And they ended up quitting in less than 3 months because it just wasn't what they wanted. And a lot of them went to smaller companies. So make sure that you fit in like culturally, make sure you enjoy the work that you're doing, make sure you enjoy the people that you're with. Even if it's at a smaller company, like you could be making so much more of a purpose in that role. My husband, for example, has been at the same small company for 9 years. And he loves it. Yes, his clients are like these really, really big banks, but his company or his team of, all of them are 50 people. They all really, really know each other. They have game night all the time, even now virtually. I know his other coworkers, I know their wives. It's a great time and a great community. And he prefers that versus working at a big company. So just make sure, culturally, it's really what you want, because a name is a name. But if you hate your job and you hate what you're doing, it's no amount of money can make it worth it. Unless you're a very, very poor recent college grad, you can suck it up for a few years.
All right, so I believe we are closing in on time, so I think we're going to wrap it up here. For all of our members, more information about our next event will be provided soon via Slack. For many of you tuning in online who may be interested in becoming a member of IBC, please check out any of our national chapters at internatus.org/apply. I want to take a moment to thank everybody for coming today and Ms. Jenks for taking time out of her day to speak for us. It was very insightful, not just for me, but I think for all of our members. So thank you everybody for coming again, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the weekend.